And we'll officially start. So again, thank you all for coming and joining. I'm Amy Daly Donovan, Executive Director for CFON. Thrilled to have you here because I'm also thrilled about the topic today. I'm very glad to invite ResultsLab and one of their partners and colleagues, Colorado Access Foundation, to talk with us a little bit about how using equitable data can support learning practices and therefore support the partners that you all work with. So it should be a very illuminating day. Again, invite lots of participation from you, not only with questions, but also sharing your own experiences. So without further ado, I will turn it over to Kenzie Strong from ResultsLab, who will be working with Cassidy Smith from the Colorado Access Foundation. Thank you both.
Thank you, Amy. I'm so glad to be here with you all. Again, Kenzie Strong, she, her pronouns, and I've been working within the social sector for the last couple decades, and I really see how important this conversation is today as you all are sitting in your own foundation space and thinking about, how we all are all engaging with our current environment as funding's tightening up, knowing there's a real desire to act and support. What today's conversation really is going to be focused in on is an element of like 3 areas that we believe can be supportive as we think about funding partners as they walk their data and learning journey. And I'm going to be sharing for each of these 3. It's going to feel a bit like a kind of a rapid kind of work through. We're going to introduce each topic. I'll share a bit of framing on the topic. Sometimes it'll be via data, sometimes it'll be via frameworks. And then I'm going to be sharing over with Cassidy, who's going to be stepping into okay, what does this look like and felt like in our context, which we know is sometimes the most powerful places of learning. And then where we can, we're also going to open up to the group to also hear from you all in terms of what are things you're already thinking about, so that we can also get a peer learning experience coming into play in the next hour or so. That'll be our flow. We've got 3 deep dives, one focused on investments in data and learning, one on equitable reporting, and the final on elevating partner voices. And again, we picked these 3 because we feel like these are essential opportunities right now as you all are kind of sitting in your spaces and thinking about how you can continue to be that transformative elevator in communities and how you can be working in partnership with funding partners. So just before we get into the crux of it, a little bit more introduction on who we are, so you have a chance to get to know us. So just in terms of my background, my journey has really always sat in that intersection between working within nonprofits, leading data and evaluation learning practice, but also working at the foundation level. And so really, really passionate about that intersection of like, how do we do this in a way that is most meaningful, impactful, and equitable? And when I say this, it's really about the evaluation and learning practice. So excited to join you all today. And Cassie, I'll flip it to you for a quick introduction on your side.
Hi, thanks, Kenzie. Can you all hear me okay? Great. So I am the Executive Director of the Colorado Access Foundation. We are a newer corporate private foundation, a 501c3 that was formed by Colorado Access, which is a local nonprofit health plan in our state that established us at the end of 2021. So currently we have assets around 17 million and have awarded about 11 million, a mix of project and general operating and capital grants and program related investments. So we've been very busy in our short time. We're focused on increasing the diversity of Colorado's healthcare workforce and increasing access to housing, food, and transportation. So I look forward to telling you more about our evaluation journey and experience with ResultsLab today.
Cassie. All right. And a little bit more, I didn't mention as much of who ResultsLab is, but just we really exist in the field to help organizations, social sector organizations, whether it's nonprofits, philanthropy, or government, to really bring data to life in a way that is meaningful. So we work across the gamut in more of a training and capacity support role as well as a consulting role to really help drive these practices in a meaningful way. And so had that opportunity to work with Cassidy and her team as one example of that. And you'll hear a little bit more around some of the learnings that have manifested in the Colorado Access space, but also I will also try to bring in some of that same thread of learning that we're seeing across the field as we think about evaluation and learning practices. All right, so I'd love just to start with a quick pulse in with you all. So we've identified these 3 topics as areas that we think are like potential for transformation and impact. I'd love to hear which of these feel most important to your work right now. So put a 1 if it's investments in data and learning, a 2 if it's equitable reporting, or 3 if it's elevating partner voices. Just drop it in chat. We'd just love to kind of get a pulse on where you're at, what you're really honed in on, or would like to be honed in on. Okay. Great. I'm seeing a lot of 3s and 2s coming in, equitable reporting and elevating partner voices. Okay, great. We're excited to hear more from you all as we think about what is this looking like in your context and what are you grappling with. So I'm gonna probably do given kind of where your interest and what's feeling urgent, I'm gonna do a quicker review of the investments in data learning, and then we'll spend the bulk of the time on equitable reporting and elevating partner voices. All right. So because we love data, we thought we'd start and anchor with data, just in terms of what we're seeing as state of the field as it relates to, I'm going to use the term funding partners. Most funding partners tend to be nonprofits, but not exclusively. So what is the state of the field as we look at our funding partners in terms of their evaluation and learning capacity? So while it's interesting, we are seeing improvement. I want to start with the good news. We're seeing improvement. There's been studies that have happened over the last couple of years that have shown organizations moving along a continuum. At one point, 3 years ago, they were sitting at 29% with a level that we're developing mastery. Now we're sitting at 44%. So that's good news. That said, there's still a wide swath of skills and analysis and data practices that are truly sitting in a really not mature or sufficient space. So we have 57% saying their data isn't complete, accurate, or up to date. 58% said staff aren't really quite data literate yet. So we know there's an opportunity here, kind of looking at coupling the skill set with the strategy space around data strategy. Most nonprofits still lack that formal data strategy. And then finally, as we look at the practice, interestingly, the data is telling us that 99% of nonprofits actually track some metrics, which may not be surprising to most of you, but only half are actually tracking metrics in the outcome space. So definitely an opportunity to kind of look beyond those outputs and go deeper in terms of transformation. Some of those common barriers that we're hearing, lack of time, expertise, and issues with data quality or process. Other important data points just to put on the table as we're grappling today. We still know that a lot of organizations just don't have data people. They don't have data seats within their organization. So only 6% of our nonprofits are reporting having an internal evaluator, which means most of this work. Okay. I thought someone had a strong reaction to that.
Just everyone, a reminder to please make sure you are muted as we go forward. Thank you.
Appreciate it. So very few have that internal position, which means most of the work is boiling up to whether it's the executives or the program directors, folks that really haven't had that orientation and training in the data and evaluation space. And then finally, just that look at funding. Really, there still continues to be an imbalance around where nonprofits are putting money in the evaluation space. Still, we have 84%, which is putting less than 5% of their budget. Generally, as a rule of law or as a field promising practice, we're trying to get to at least 5% of budget going towards evaluation. So still very much underneath that mark. Some are actually spending no money in this regard. And the complement here is that we also recognize that a lot of foundations really just aren't investing in space. So we have 63% of foundations that report only investing in less than 10% of their nonprofits as it relates to evaluation and learning. So kind of big picture pull out here is there's an opportunity, right? We think about, we want our nonprofits to be doing more with data, to be able to roll up their stories, to help support foundations and really showing that transformational story of change. However, there's limited capacity still, we know, and there's limited funding going in these directions. So a couple things just to kind of like as we flip to the okay, so what of this? I want to share just a few points of frame as we think about ways to invest in data and learning. And some of these are not going to be surprising to you all, but I just want to kind of hover on these as we think about what potential like right fit in terms of your practice could be or maybe. So we have the bucket here of financial support. So this is really, specific capacity grants, general operating grants, capacity add-ons to program grants, or match challenge grants. So all of this is really direct funding to support data and learning and evaluation practices. The next kind of framing here is really around providing more curated learning and development opportunities. So this can come in multiple forms. It could be, you all as a funder are organizing structured cohorts that relate to data and learning. You could be providing technical assistance packages, again, specific to data and learning opportunities. And there's others here that could you like nuances sit in between these as well. The third area that I want to spotlight is really investing in shared resources and infrastructure. So this could include shared services. So we've seen some foundations really kind of stepping in to say, hey, we want to really invest in a fractional team member that can be shared across many of our grantees. Others are looking at equipment or technology grants. We know technology continues to be a complement to the data challenge, right? Even if they have strong data practices, they don't have the systems to really bring it to life in the best way possible. So that's an example of the technology grants. Capacity building marketplace, seeing some interesting trending going in this direction where funders sitting in the space that you've got a broader perspective, being able to draw connections between potential capacity builders and supply and demand, basically, really being able to make those connections, as well as peer networks. And then lastly, just to call out here, is longer term support. So it could be, endowment or reserve contributions, and certainly, investing in multi-year partnerships, multi-year grants, which allows organizations to really kind of take that space and invest in their data and evaluation practices in a more intentional way. So here's really just wanted to share this as a frame for you all to be reflecting to and through. And what we're going to do now is really we're going to take a bit of a double click on the curated learning and development bit, which Cassidy and her team have been going deeper in. So we're going to Cassidy, I'll turn it to you to share a little bit more about what that's looked like and felt like for you all.
Great. Are we going to the next slide?
You got it.
Thank you. So I came on as executive director in March of 2023, where so I inherited a strategic plan that had been developed by a consultant, as well as some grants that had already been awarded. And so, we were at a place, being a new organization, of building our infrastructure while we were already starting to make some investments. And but before we continued further, our small team of 3 in our board of directors recognized the importance of developing a strategic approach to evaluate our work and how we were engaging with community partners and our grant partners. So it was a perfect time to engage with ResultsLab. We were familiar with them through some work with some shared colleagues. And so it was a time to help us build our own capacity. So we walked through this process of the align, capture, and transform phase alongside as ResultsLab was engaging with an initial cohort of our grant partners. And because it was so small, so we have about 40 plus grantee partners now. At the time, I think it was closer to 15. So we acknowledged, let's reach out to those who are interested in participating in this learning experience, but also opened it up to some potential grant partners, knowing that we were kind of limiting ourselves if we just kept it to who we're currently engaged with. And so I'll just say I can't really overstate the value of these tools. My team uses them on a daily basis as we're engaging with not only our current grantees who are in our portfolio, but just engaging in conversations with partners who are interested in funding. As well as we present information to our board, we're able to show whether it's a project or a particular grant recommendation, kind of where it fits into our strategy and where we are when it comes to our measurement plan. And so it's definitely something that we haven't just put on the shelf or our website, but we're actively using on a regular basis. So if we could go to the next slide. So for this capacity building phase for our grant partners, as I mentioned at the time, we had a smaller group. I believe we ended up with about 9 individuals from 7 organizations who participated in this process. And they, we learned that they didn't really have the capacity at the time to actively participate in all of these offerings, but we did see really great engagement in the ACT and coaching sessions. So that's the align, capture, and transform phases of the work. And these groups participated in a monthly 4-session long cohort learning experience that walked them through each of those phases. And some of the highlights of their experience that we, as it wrapped up a few months ago, were that we had all participating organizations walked away with at least one tangible tool for development, which was really exciting as a funder who's investing in this, that there was something practical that came out for every participant. So whether it was their own impact strategy or measurement plan or a program model, I think many asked the team to help them review how they were collecting data or the surveys that they're using or help with creating them. 2 of our grant partners really showed continued interest and really engaged quite a bit with the coaching sessions and found that very valuable. And through this experience with ResultsLab, we have identified ways that we can continue to offer capacity building support for our grant partners. So not only those who participated in this initial session, but as we build out our evaluation framework and how we're engaging. That's all I have to share. Kinsey, is there anything else you'd like me to point out?
That's great. Yeah, no, that's perfect, Cassidy. I appreciate that. We'd love to just, so we wanted to kind of share the frame, give an example, and now just really hear from you all. So as you think about these 4 areas that we're posturing, what types of data and learning investments are you most interested in here, or are you already doing? And this is where we'd love, feel free to either drop it in chat, or if you want to unmute and directly share, we'd love to hear your experiences and what you're thinking about in this area. Or any questions, honestly, that you've heard, where we framed so far, if there's any questions you want for clarity.
I appreciate that how it's set out so clearly, and I was doing a little self-reflection on we're actually pretty good doing a lot of these capacity grants, general operating. We don't do capacity add-on to program grants, so we're really coaching our grantees to include overhead costs that are part of the program within those. So a little bit different angle. And we have a matching grant that's for endowments, which is also nice. But one thing I don't think we have really delved into as much as shared services and equipment. Do you have any good examples of common things people are doing that's just kind of entry level sort of shared equipment and services? Because I feel like those could go from anything that's very small to something, like you mentioned, staff positions that are, quite a bit more intensive involvement.
Yeah, thanks, Casey. Great questions. Yeah, so I'd say on the shared services side, it could be, yes, like from a full staff position to that fractional staff position that we're seeing, possibilities play out. What we've seen interesting, like where you might have a group of grantees that are all focused in on a similar issue area. Let's say you're all kind of rallied around youth development, that opportunity to really bring in one shared fractional data and evaluation support that can be threaded throughout, throughout multiple organizations there. On the technology side, I think the most common area of focus is on data systems, right? And so really it's either a grant that's supporting their investment in a data system, or in some cases, I've actually seen it's a shared data platform or a system that the funder wants to make accessible across their grant partners, where it makes sense to have like a threaded roll-up system for them to be able to access and use for their own purposes. And I also would love, if others have examples of things that they've used in these spaces, don't hesitate to bring those in as well.
There was a comment in the chat from Sonia in New Hampshire.
Wonderful. Okay. Okay. So Sonia's calling out opportunities, it sounds like, for more of the shared metrics and outcomes, potentially collaborative design around that, and tracking around that. So I'd love to just share a little bit of experience here, and again, open up to others in this direction as well. I feel like as a sector, I feel like there was a lot of attention on this earlier on, maybe in the post-decade, and I think it's kind of calmed a little bit, but I'm seeing more and more attention in this direction now. And I think the opportunity is, like, as a funder, is how you might sit in that space of like the facilitator, the mobilizer around what those shared metrics can and should be. And I think the reason I bring up like history, I think there's been a lot of negative experience around like forced shared metrics, right? But when done well in a true like co-design orientation, I think it could actually be really successful in bringing in an element of efficiency, so that nonprofits are not reporting the same things, in so many different ways to so many different sources, right? And having that real collaborative space to come together. So I've seen some really great opportunity here to do this well. There are some systems that are even available, and like, how do we start to organize our shared metrics so that it's very clearly aligned and folks can really tap in and help co-design that, and again report through that as well. Sonia, I want to kind of just take a quick pause on my initial reflection. Is there anything else that you're kind of thinking about, or any questions that are coming to your mind in this direction?
I mean, I think you pretty much covered it. I think where it gets tricky is like the specifics. Like, I'd love to learn more about those systems that are used to collect and track data. I feel like Tilton Fund, we have pretty strong partnerships, and could work together to create some of these systems, but with, partners are also different, and they're all looking at different things and serving different functions. And yet I'm always like, well, how do you roll that up into a dashboard snapshot? That kind of thing.
Totally, Cassie. I feel like we've just been like living in that same conversation, right? Even at a foundation level. I think one thing I've found, it's a nuance, right? Of like, you want folks to have that flexibility. You don't want them forced in, and you need it in a way that it's streamlined enough so that there's a roll up possibility, right? And so I would, really encourage here thinking about what are those umbrella metrics that are aligning enough, but have like opportunity for flexibility of like, when we say this aligned umbrella metric, there's different ways to think about that and different ways to report to and through that, but it's a way to have some broader aggregation. Often those tend to be more population level metrics that you'd be talking about that can have some, wider and natural alignment points across a multitude of like different data sources and funders.
That's helpful. Thank you.
Yeah. Does anyone else, I think this is a really important like space for conversation. Anyone else have experiences in this space? Feel free to keep thoughts coming in if they are related to that. And also want to touch in on Amanda's question. Can you share some examples of the structured cohort model hosted by or housed at a community foundation? Yeah. So we've done some work where first working with the community foundation. So I'm going to give an example here in Denver, where we were able to first work with the foundation itself and kind of think about what your goals are for the cohort, and what you want the experience to look like. So some of those like reflective questions that would sit at that phase of really like thinking about what does accountability look like for these cohort experiences? And what does choice look like? So there's an interesting dynamic there. And I've seen, folks sitting on different points of that spectrum. Some say, you know what, we want to offer this training opportunities or these cohort opportunities and let folks really step in where is most meaningful to them. Others are saying, hey, I actually want this to be a part of my like funding requirement, right? And then pieces in between. So that's just one kind of orientating like reflection question to start with. And then I think one common thread of focus that's always important is to make sure that folks are opting in. It isn't actually a required. You never want to force anyone to do capacity building, right? So looking at making sure you're offering the opportunity in a way that's clear, and then offering enough understanding of what it is so they can opt into the experience. And then like in terms of the structure of the cohort, we've played with a lot of different ways. I feel like we're constantly like learning and iterating here. I do think at its core to have that group, like that shared learning experience together, whether it's like quarterly webinars, monthly webinars, we've done different iterations, but then complementing that with individualized coaching, I think becomes really important. And the individualized coaching doesn't have to be extensive. It can be like we actually do, it's almost like 5 hours a month type style, where it is lighter in orientation, but it's a place for them to really like sink in, apply what they've learned in the core training, and really have that accountability partner with them to ensure that the learning is being taken forward into the practice. So happy to share, Amanda. I feel like we've got lots more we could definitely share on that. I think it looks like Jackie might have been just popping in some further detail. Thanks, Jax. That's great. So happy to go, share a little bit more on that as we continue. So I am going to move us into the other two deep dives, because I know these may be near and dear to your heart right now. So thank you so much for engaging here. It's always helpful to hear where folks are at. All right. So I'm going to move us into the space of reporting. And as we think about equitable data and evaluation practices, I want to just share a few top level considerations. And again, I think some of these will be things you've thought about, you may be doing, but I just want to kind of do a frame up. So first is the co-design aspect, engaging grantees or community and defining success. So this is a little bit what we were just talking about. You could be doing that collaboratively, you could be doing that individually with unique grantees. So that opportunity for co-design, the opportunity for data ownership of your grant or with your grantees, ensuring grantees retain the rights to the data, that there's always that feedback loop process where when you're collecting data that you're sharing it back, thinking about the right and most accessible formats to do so. This one I find really interesting. How do we right size reporting? Really making sure we're matching requirements to the grant size. I'm sure you all have seen different scenarios where there's pretty extensive reporting requirements for maybe like a $10,000 grant. And we're seeing more and more grant partners saying like, you know what, actually that might not be the best use of me actually taking that funding. So really thinking about what the right size is, and then also thinking about the right formats, accepting alternative formats to reporting from what's been very traditional of the long written narrative reports, to thinking about other ways to really capture that data. Like if they already have reports that they're giving to other funders, or they have a presentation that they've shared exactly on this topic and it's recorded, and maybe that's a good fit for sharing their learning to and through you all or with you all. The orientation of learning over compliance, using data for mutual learning, having that space for co-interpretation or shared sense making together versus just this like report up and report down, having that collective space to really make sense and meaning out of it. Also want to elevate valuing multiple evidence types. I think we as a sector have been in an interesting historical space where we've been kind of tightening up like what we're envisioning as evidence, which historically has had a lot more orientation with some of the more rigorous academic style evaluations or quantitative oriented evaluations. But now really looking at how do we think about evidence in a more holistic way, thinking about lived experiences, stories, and culturally relevant indicators. And then finally, just note here on transparency and reciprocity, explaining why data is collected and sharing funder data and insights. So that two-way reflection space. So these are kind of just guiding principles. I think what becomes even more interesting and where you're like, oh, like what does this mean in practice? How do we bring this to life? I want to just share one more point of framing that is starting to show that story and that change. What you're seeing visually on the slide here is really that like funder partner reporting continuum. On the left, you're seeing much more of the proving impact, that strong sense in a space of accountability. And as you move to the right, more of the improvement and that learning orientation and culture and space. And some of the different practices that tend to sit within this flow and this continuum. And I think the like takeaway, you guys can definitely take some time to absorb this, but the takeaway here is there's not necessarily a right answer. It's not always the right to say everything on the right-hand side of the slide is where you need to be. I think the important thing is to be reflective in terms of your goals and your practice and think about where your grantees are and what they need, and really think about what is the right kind of creation or curation of practice to really build into your space. So for example, you may say like, hey, we do really need to have a little bit more of that accountability when it comes to showing, that evidence about reaching outcomes. But we also want to make sure we're turning these into structured learning conversations, and we want to bring in elements of like story, right? And so really thinking about how these pieces can come together in real. So that said, I'd like to again turn it to you, Cassie, for you to share a little bit like what I know we grappled with these same broader questions, like how did you all manifest this actual reality in terms of what your reporting looks like and feels like?
Yeah, I remember that visual and how we thought of some of our specific types of grants and the capacity of those grant partners and sort of where we would place them along that continuum. And that really helped inform what you see here. But along the process, we made it clear, and ResultsLab really acknowledged and I think took to heart how important our values are to us and how we wanted to center our work around that and how we approach interacting with grant partners and our reporting requirements. And so that was a great starting place for us and something that we kept revisiting and sort of comparing what we were coming up with and how does it compare to our values. And so, we said we want to clearly communicate and be very transparent that we do have reporting requirements and expectations, but we want to be flexible and collaborative in how we gather information. So our grants that tend to be smaller in scope and amount, we don't ask for as much. And those that are more involved, we are willing, as Kinsey mentioned, to accept all sorts of formats or reports that maybe that organization submitted to another funder for the same project. And so our team works collaboratively with that organization to review that information and see how it fits into our reporting requirements. So it was very important for us to understand what is the minimum amount of information that's truly required and why do we want it and what are we going to do with it? So that's always also a lens or an exercise that we go through before asking someone for information. So we do see ourselves as evaluation champions, and we look for ways, as Kinsey mentioned earlier, to provide support for that. So is it making sure that the funding that we're providing for project or general operating grants includes support for their data practices and learning, or is there technical assistance that we can offer through a partner like ResultsLab, or connecting our grantees with other grantees who are doing similar work, or collaborating with other funders. This does require a lot of staff time. I think I've mentioned we have a small team. There are 3 of us, and we all see ourselves as having a role in this work. And as the number of our investments grows, this is taking even more time. And so, but we're still committed to this flexibility because it's resulted in such rich information, qualitative information, in addition to the quantitative data that we're getting. We're thinking about, and just had a great discussion with our board last week, about what are some standard things that we can collect across all grantees. Again, with that, what's the minimum required? In addition to how can we start to automate some of our data collection and reporting. So right now we have a very manual process. As I said, we're a newer foundation, so we're building out our grants management system and thinking about ways to do this in a more efficient way. But it's been a very positive experience so far. So I'll pause there.
Thanks, Cassidy. One thing I'd love just to add, being driven by your values, knowing equitable orientation is one of the core values. That pushed us into a conversation recently, which I think actually a lot of foundations are having right now around demographic reporting. And what do we need to be thinking about? Do we need to be thinking differently in terms of what we're asking our grant partners to be reporting up? And so we're looking at a shift here around asking organizations to really just report their reach, and then looking at a proxy demographic breakdown as we look at zip codes and looking at zip code analysis, and using that to really understand and frame how reach may be further disaggregated by the communities in which they're serving, without actually asking the grant partners to report specific or to ask for specificity right now in terms of which vulnerable demographic populations they're serving. So that's just an example of kind of how this is coming to life in real time. All right. Well, again, I'd love to just open it back up to the full group. And as you're either thinking about the frame that we just put forward, really want to hear what's a change you're thinking about or you're actually taking forward right now to make your reporting practice more equitable. And again, feel free to drop it in chat or unmute. Either way is great. Oh, Amy, I'm seeing your drop in here on the demographics. Anything you want to elevate there?
Not necessarily. When you were talking about that as a challenge, there's a effort or initiative by the Candid organization to make it easier for nonprofits around that reporting. So I was just wondering if anybody on the call was a partner of that, and if they had any insights, if it was making things easier or not. But we don't have to go into that tangent. It just was a connection. And for those who aren't aware of that initiative, you can learn more about it with the link.
Come on in.
Can you, Kenzie, just clarify the question a little bit more? Is it the reporting structure, organizational structure, or what's required?
Just reporting practice. So it could be what you're asking for, but it also could be how you're asking it. Things that you may be doing or thinking about to want to make it more equitable for your grant partners, or things you're just wondering about in this area. Just bringing this slide up for some inspiration too as you're looking at this and thinking about it. Yeah, and Jacqueline's noting, you know, it sounds like this does feel a little bit more urgent for some of you right now. Are there any questions that you're grappling with as it relates to doing having a greater focus on equity in your reporting practice? Well, I'm happy to keep us moving. Again, don't hesitate to keep any thoughts coming into the chat as we go forward. Wonderful, Amy. That's great. Yeah, so it sounds like, and there's a lot of great resources and tools in the space to really support the practice here. So let's spend our last kind of frame of focus here on voice, community voice. Just a point of grounding on why does this even matter? You know, it really allows us as foundations or organizations to better understand the needs, priorities, values, and ideas of those closest to a problem or experience. So really ensuring that those that are most impacted by a problem are helping to influence or create that. Practically, you know, as we kind of think about some framing points here, the question of when as a foundation, as a community foundation, when might it make sense for you to be incorporating voice into your flow? And kind of the frame here is really at all phases in the continuum, right? From that early strategic advising space as you're thinking about informing strategy and the direction you may be going, to the space of process design. An example of process design could be your reporting practice, right? And what you want your reporting practice to look like and feel like. You'll hear more from Cassie about that in a moment. To the data collection experience around how to ensure you're understanding what change looks like with your grant partners, how that's manifesting and why, and then onward to a space of sense making of the data and sharing out of the data. And I've seen some of the most powerful, as a foundation, the most powerful share outs of your transformation in the community will come with that coalesce voice, right? Not just your voice, but the voice of your funding partners, the voice of your community members, right? So being able to bring that to light together. So headline here, there are multiple points to engage voice. The other thing I want us to just take a moment with is whose voice, right? Whose voice should we be bringing forward? And, you know, as community foundations, I think you've got kind of a continuum of opportunity here, from those that may be more representative groups to those that are the most proximate or connected groups. And I think what's interesting about your space is, you know, in some cases that may be your most proximate or connected or priority population voice is your funding partners, your grantees. In other cases, for some of you, it may be actual community members or those individuals your initiatives or your transformative work is really trying to serve. So always kind of thinking about whose voice is most optimal. And when you are in a space where you're not able to have that most connective voice, whether it is the funding partner or the community, how and where proxy voices come into play. And that's what you're seeing in these representative groups on the left. It could be staff, it could be frontline staff. In your case, that might be program officers, those that are working most closely with community, or it could be broader community members like your board members, or those that are more like in space of an advisory space where they are proxy community members that, I shouldn't say proxy, they're community members who are really helping to help steward and bring perspective to what you do. So just always kind of anchoring back into this frame and this continuum to think about what makes sense for your context. Cassidy was able to do some of this work as it related to the data collection, having voice come into the data collection and from your most priority population. So Cassie, if you want to share what that looked like in your case.
Yes, thank you. So as Kinsey mentioned, we wanted to ensure that potential and our current grant partners were providing input to inform the development of our grant making guidelines, our grant application, and our report forms. And so this focus group process really helped us with that, and just thinking again about our overall approach to engaging with community and with our funded partners. And so ResultsLab actually facilitated the focus groups without us, which is always helpful for that power dynamic and for us to not be in the room. And we were able to provide $75 for each participant. Although it was a smaller cohort, again, this was kind of early in our formation as a funder. It helped us to get this input early and directly impact what we ended up developing. And so our grant forms and applications, and I think even the grant making guidelines, state clearly when we ask for any information, it explains why we want that information, so why we are asking for it, and how we plan to use it. And our team works very collaboratively with organizations. So right now we do have an invited process. We are moving to an RFP process. We're going to test that out next year with ResultsLab's help. But as far as the invited process is, the good thing about it is that our team can work really closely with the organization that is applying and help them with that process. And we actually share with them what we are going to present to our board of directors so that we're all aligned and clear on the expected outcomes as the grant is being presented, and then once it's executed. So we have a shared understanding, excuse me. So we're continuing to figure out how can we continue to do this, so it's not just a one and done. And it's been really helpful, just through active participation in grant partner events that we're invited to. We schedule debrief meetings after a grant report is submitted to thank them for completing it, but also to walk through it together so that, again, we have that shared understanding and we can add anything that they may not have had time to incorporate. And then we offer, we want to continue to offer forums like the capacity building learning sessions going forward as we have bigger cohorts of grantees that are doing similar work, but also those who are doing different work so that they can learn from each other. And we've been really pleased. We think a really good indicator of trust so far. I put it in quotes because, we're still in early days here, but is that our grant partners are proactively reaching out to us when things aren't going as planned. So we're not finding that out once a report is submitted, but real time, we're having those conversations and talking about, well, what can we do to support, or, if we need to amend something in the grant. And so it's been a great experience, and I think we'll continue to figure out how can we incorporate that partner voice, that grantee voice throughout those other stages in the journey that Kinsey outlined.
Just a quick add, I remember when we were leading these discussions, the appreciation from grant partners of just saying like, wow, I just appreciate that you asked, right? And while that seems like such a simple thing, it goes such a long way, especially when it's actually used on the other side. So
oh yeah, sorry, I may have already covered some of this, but here are some quotes from those focus group experiences.
I think what was cool about this too is it was very certainly validating and inform what the evaluation practice should look like and feel like. And then even after this, continuing to get that more organic feedback along the way when folks were trying on the new reports and saying like, ooh, this is actually not fitting. but that fact that they had that open trust with Cassidy and her team to just share that in direct form as well went a long way. Amy, I love your question. Yeah. So we wanted to go into conversation here too. I would love to hear, to Amy's point, if anyone's just really gotten rid of their written reports from grantees and what like current state or ideal future state looks like. Also would love just to hear, as you all are thinking about voice, kind of back to this slide, like whose voice are you elevating, and what does that looking like in your cases? Okay, so Casey's coming in. We accept annual reports as final reports for general operating support grants. Yeah, Cassidy, you as well, right? Similar approach. And Casey, I'm curious for you or others, what's been the implication of that, whether it's on your time or how that's landed with funding partners?
I would say for us, the implications not much for program officer. We have pretty minimal final reports to begin with. There's a weird time differential where they're like, but we just have last year's and we need to, and I'm like, just submit what you have. People are worried they don't have the most up to date. So for smaller organizations, they might not have an annual report, but we try to have them summarize something that they could use for their board or the community anyhow. And so it feels like it's a positive learning step versus, nothing at all, that's something good that they could use for their organization. As far as not having anything written, we've gone back and forth. We used to not have any written for our multi-year interim reports, and we just do site visits. But for our accounting and auditing, it is helpful to have something, even if it's pretty minimal, on file for that. So kind of balancing that.
Awesome. I'm encouraged to see, additional comments coming in from Benjamin and Sonia. It sounds like you guys have really opened up in terms of what you're accepting in as well as reports. That's encouraging. Great. Well, I'd love to, as we're kind of closing out in the last few minutes, I do want to share a resource as we think about community voice or integrating voice. We do have, Jackie, if you don't mind dropping it in, we do have a tool resource for you all to kind of take your own reflection on where you're at, where you want to go. And I'd say similar to the other, like the reporting practice, it's not like it's always a space of critical reflection to think about, you don't always have to be on the highest point of participatory practices. It's really thinking about how you want your practice to look like and feel like, and when, right? When are those spaces, spaces to bring in the voice. So this is an example of our inclusive data practices action plan. So I encourage you just to sit down with your team and take that reflection. Thanks, Jackie, for dropping that in. So I know today it was a fairly rapid kind of around the merry-go-round, if you will, on 3 different equitable practices. We wanted to do a slight kind of drop in with really our hope and goal is that maybe there's something you heard today that you're like, ooh, this is sparking me that I want to take forward. So as we close out today, want to hear from you on like any final questions that you may have. We're always happy to follow up and do further deep diving where it's most helpful, or other resources that you may be interested in. So any open questions, and then an action. If there's one thing that you want to take away from today's conversation that you heard today or you've been thinking about in the equitable data and evaluation practice space, please drop it in chat. And as you're doing that, I want to just share a couple other resources that are being offered that may be of interest in particular to your funding partners. So one of the things that ResultsLab is really looking at right now is like, how do we make, what deeper consulting work, how do we make it much more accessible right now? Because a lot of grant partners they don't have certainly the funds as much, but certainly the time too. They're feeling very constrained. So we've just kicked off a coaching series that is direct one-on-one support with nonprofit partners to really work them through in like a working session fashion. Our Align series and our Capture series. And in that, they get specific expertise and support and resources and tools to create what we call an impact strategy or a theory of change style and their program model. So if you have any grant partners that you're like, oh, I want to be able to invest, but I'm still trying to kind of figure out the bigger picture strategy, this is a great step in to really engage them now. Jackie, is there anything you wanted to add on this one? Okay. Perhaps not, but I'll keep
to find my mute. This is just we've heard from a lot of our partners that cost is a challenge right now. So this is a very low cost way to start to really make some progress towards that impact strategy. The strategy kind of part of our ACT model. We actually did just launch the capture phase as well. So on the website, we just launched that this week. So I'd be happy to extend that 10% off to any of your grantees that maybe have a strong strategy but could use some help in coaching in that data collection space. So this is just a new series that's a lower cost entry to making some progress in this way and accelerating this work. So yeah, excited about this. And I'll share a link to that page and our newsletter in the chat in case you all want to follow up afterwards with any other details. And then we're going to be giving away one of the grantees on this call. It's going to be a random raffle of all the participants to actually go through the Align coaching series at no cost. So I will follow up with Amy after this to share the details there. So great to see you all today.
Wonderful. All right. Well, thanks again for being with us. It was great to hear from you all and looking forward to further collaboration as we move forward.
Yes, and I would like to thank you, Kenzie, so much, and Cassidy for your great examples and the framework. It's just always looking for ways to think about this really challenging element of our work. So thank you for sharing your experiences and your work. And to all of you for spending the hour with us today. As I said, this is recorded. Let your colleagues know to be on the lookout. We will send it out to the full CFON distribution list. So it'll be there for your viewing pleasure. And I thank you again for joining us.